So our project is obsessive compulsive disorder, and I'll give a little bit of insight into the overview. So the overview of this condition, I took it back to the beginning where OCD, it gained recognition more as just as an intrusive thoughts in like different people. So whatever they were experiencing was just like intrusive thoughts. Now we know that it's more than that. And these people just couldn't seem to escape like this reality that they had. It was first identified as a form of monomania or partial insanity. So at first it was like, oh, this person's insane because like their obsessive and compulsive thoughts are making them act a certain way. And it was considered a disorder of intellect, which was pretty interesting to me. Intellect is like, you know, your level of intelligence, things like that. What qualifies as OCD? Therapists look for three main things, right? So this person should have an obsession. And they do have compulsive behavior. So this is like behaviors that they feel that they need to do in order for them to like continue on with their day. And this can range from like checking things to counting things. And these obsessions and compulsions have to take up a lot of time to get in the way of this person's daily life in order to, I guess, qualify as OCD. So checking things, like checking door locks, if this takes up a majority of somebody's day, then that's a problem, and it is probably OCD. And then characteristics that qualify OCD, right? So what exactly does OCD look like in people? There's things like checking, like I mentioned before, such as locks, appliances, like, oh, is the fridge closed, you know, right before they leave home. Usually a lot of this is routine stuff. So they'll check the locks before leaving or before going to sleep, checking in on loved ones to make sure they're safe. This is more with like intrusive thoughts, because if their intrusive thoughts are telling them, oh, you know, like you're in danger, this and that, then they're more likely to make sure that their family and themselves are safe. And then there's things like counting or tapping. So this is more number-based, like counting. Maybe they have a certain number that they count to, or maybe they have a certain number of steps that they have to take. It all depends on what they do, right? And repetition is a really big thing too. So repeating certain words or repeating certain actions is a really big part of it. So a couple more characteristics are spending a lot of time washing or cleaning. This also has to do with intrusive thoughts, because especially like right now, if we think about it, in the pandemic, people with like OCD who are more focused on like cleanliness or who are like clean freaks might be having a hard time because they already spend a lot of time washing and cleaning, but now with everything going on, it might just trigger their anxiety and have them spend even more time washing and cleaning. Ordering or arranging things, this is big too, because having things a certain way makes their day go by faster, you know, or sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes ordering and arranging things takes up most of their time. And then praying excessively or engaging in rituals triggered by religious fear is also a big thing. Praying, and there's actually like I don't want to say version, but like, I guess a sub subject of OCD that it has to do with religion. And that was like, it's pretty important because these people, they have religion take up most of their time. And then junk, this is kind of like hoarders, and they're not really ready to let go. That might trigger their anxiety and the like.
Okay. So, portrayal of condition. Can you go to the first slide? Okay. So, how the film portrays OCD. Tasha Johansson portrays OCD very accurately because she has firsthand experience with the condition. Her daughter suffers from OCD. She's been suffering from it since she was 8 years old, and it's something that as a mother, Tasha deals with. She is aware of the stigmas and stereotypes which come with OCD. She mentioned social media posts which have photos like the one I have put on the slide, where things are super organized and people hashtag it OCD or comment things like, I'm so OCD, LOL. She also gave a real life example of the struggles that her daughter has faced. She tells a story about how her daughter was convinced that she had run several people over with her car while driving home, and how she managed to confront her compulsive thoughts by practicing exercises she had learned in therapy. So why it's portrayed more accurately is Tasha's speech on OCD is scientifically accurate. For example, when Tasha explains the difference between real OCD and OCD that's portrayed on social media, it can be backed up by the definition of what compulsions are. Compulsions are repetitive behavior or mental acts that the person feels driven to perform in response to an obsession or according to rules that must be applied rigidly. A perfectionist is not needs to be applied rigidly. Like, people can choose not to do it and be okay with it. But when somebody has OCD, not doing that causes them a lot of distress. Tasha's daughter experiences with OCD can be proven with one of the most common obsessions which occur, which is the fear of harming self or others. This is a fear her daughter has the night her OCD convinced her she had run over several people with her car. She was very scared that she had killed those people, and she even wanted to hand herself over to the police. And Tasha also mentions the shame that comes with OCD, and that is also something that is scientifically accurate. OCD often brings a lot of shame, and it can be backed up by scholarly articles. One of them which claimed theoretical and anecdotal support for the role of shame in obsessive-compulsive related disorders is prominent.
And I talked about coping strategies. So coping strategies are mostly used by relatives, and cutting back on their own life to give their patient more security, so then it'll make their relative more comfortable. By the relative supporting obsessive rituals, it assists the patient, assists in participating in the obsessive rituals to reduce their person with OCD's feelings of being a burden, and then talking about the obsessions. So in an attempt to understand what the person's going through will help them connect better with them. I also talked about resisting stigma. So stigma presents a fundamental issue. So it is like between individuals with OCD and their families. It affects how they experience their disorder, the willingness to search and adequate help, and impacts the disorder on daily functioning. Stigma increases anxiety of the patients. Individuals suffering with OCD and their families might be terrified of reactions from outsiders to the family.
Alright, so I did the first half of education and initiatives. So this first one is about the importance of education. In an article I read, it spoke about how often people with OCD are portrayed in, whether it be the media or video or, movies, as sort of comic relief characters. This, of course, isn't the most positive portrayal, as it sort of lacks the focus of OCD as an anxiety disorder. It focuses more on this idea of perfectionism and cleanliness, and totally skirts around the fact that OCD is largely focused on anxiety and the anxiety that comes with the obsessions and compulsions. And this portrayal by the media can then lead to the trivialization of the disorder. And the article goes to mention that trivialization of a disorder or a disease involves an oversimplification of the symptoms or causes, skepticisms of its severity, and or mockery. So the social media posts like the ones mentioned in the video that claim neatness or organization as OCD are an example of trivialization, in the sense that they oversimplify what the symptoms are. They boil it down to just being neat or just being clean, and they then, in a sense, also show skepticism of the severity, because by relating it to just this perfectionism, they totally don't mention any of the anxiety that surrounds people who actually have the disorder. But there are foundations out there that are working to educate people about OCD. The International OCD Foundation is a website I spent some time on when doing research. It has many, many pages dedicated to explaining what OCD is, what type of people have OCD, where to reach out for help, and educating people who might not know what OCD is. It puts this idea of obsessions and compulsions into easily understood terms, to where anybody without prior knowledge will still be able to understand, but while still managing to show the severity of the disorder. They also have specific articles written going deeper into specific instances surrounding OCD. One I found specifically talked about a teacher in his 30s who had what they called hit and run OCD, which is exactly what the young lady talked about in the video has, where he had this fear that he had either hit someone with his car or ran over an animal, and it led him to impulsively checking articles or thinking any sirens that went off in his area were coming to arrest him because he has killed someone. And it talks about how by meeting with his therapist he was able to actually begin driving again and not feel any of the fear surrounding his OCD and driving anymore.
So another foundation that really focuses on OCD is called Rethink Mental Illness. It's basically just a foundation dedicated to rewriting the stigma around various mental disorders, but they also specifically focus on OCD. They have a lot of information about this disorder on their website, and then they have an entire day dedicated to raising awareness, acquiring funding, as well as education to the public about the disorder. They do a lot of campaigning and really just advocating for education for the disorder, just because it's used in the media so wrongly. And then they also fund 140 local support groups and offer over 200 services, which is really great just for a local foundation. We can further these goals by educating our family and friends about the true natures of OCD. Really focus on how it's an anxiety disorder. There's intrusive thoughts. It's not just them being paranoid, and realizing that these thoughts aren't just from them being quote unquote crazy. It's really stemming from intrusive thoughts and anxiety. And also explaining symptoms on how to handle somebody with this disorder. So this could be families and friends really taking the time to understand your sister with this disorder, or your daughter, or your son. They have to be handled slightly differently, and so it's really important to understand how to interact with them and calm them down, especially in an episode moment. You can also use social media to spread awareness. There's also articles on how we can use social media to advocate for health education, and this one woman, she explains that social media is a faster and more efficient way to raise awareness to a topic.
particularly health and mental health education. I think this is very relevant now, especially because we are in a day and age of social media, and so that's why a lot of foundations are through websites and like online type of formats. You can also donate to organizations that fund the spread of awareness of OCD.
So now we'll be getting into personal connections. I guess we'll each just share our personal connection as the slide comes up. So we're going to start off with.
Okay. So my personal connection is OCD is something that is more common than we think. I don't have OCD, but I have some tendencies like continuous hand washing and like picking the skin around my fingernails or like at my fingernails. And then there's just different levels of severity with how severe each person's compulsions are.
So I actually have OCD. I was diagnosed when I was 15 years old. I have compulsive thoughts or repetitive behaviors. I still get treatment for it, and I take medication for it. And I want to say, as somebody who has OCD, I thought the TED Talk that we showed is really accurate to what it's like to suffer from OCD.
So for me, I have anxiety. It's something that has plagued me for a very long time. So as OCD is an anxiety disorder, it was really easy for me to relate and understand to a lot of the symptoms because there are things I personally struggle with that are very, very similar. So I, wanted to work on this because I think having an understanding of disorders that are somewhat similar to your own is just a better way to further your education and understanding.
So for me, OCD runs in my family, and my dad actually has OCD, and a lot of people on his side have it as well. So it's really easy for me to relate to this disorder just because what I've witnessed like in my household. There's normal occurrences that would be like repeating stair steps, obsessive cleaning. My dad's really big on like germs and wiping down like countertops over and over again. There's also counting and impulsive actions.
Brittany sadly could not make it to be here with us today, but you are free to read her slide that she made. I'll give a reading of it for you as well. She says that her friend from college told her that they were diagnosed with OCD. Apparently very particular in the way things are placed and the idea of a specific schedule each day.
So I have OCD, and so does my grandmother, so it does run in my family. My grandma's is more of like checking and cleaning, as well as like rearranging. She's like constantly moving around, and mine is more like counting and repeating behaviors. So like, for as long as I can remember, I count steps everywhere I go. I only eat snacks in even numbers. It's a lot of little things that I really didn't really notice until people started pointing it out. So yeah, and it takes up a lot of my time. Yeah.
And I guess we will end with some lovely sources that we cited that you're free to visit if you would like more information.